It was pitch black. I was moving quietly up the stairs to our house, but I had to move quick. I was over 2 hours late. As I made my way up the steps, feeling my way along the banisters, I reached the top doorway, pushed it open, and finally stepped up to the final step. I felt something brush my foot. All of a sudden, bam, 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 a strategically placed 3 gallon galvanized milk bucket had been bumped and hit every single step on the way down that I had carefully walked up on the way up. I froze. The light flicked on brightly, blinding me for a second. There stood my father in his big whites. Now I needed a really good story.
That was an example. That was an example of using a story to capture the interest of the audience. Hopefully, I'm not sure if it worked or not, but I'd like to think it did. To capture the interest of the audience at the beginning of a story. This talk is about how to structure speech, how to choose a topic mainly, because you guys already all know how to build a speech. You have a beginning, middle, and end. You already know all that stuff. So we're going to do mainly concentrate, and you tie the big end back to the beginning and stuff. We'll talk about that a little bit and about some other ideas, but we're mainly concerned with getting over the fear of finally getting rid of analysis paralysis, picking a topic, and picking something that you can talk about, something that you want to talk, that you own, that you really want to talk about. I'm not the only person with this problem. A colleague of mine in River City Toastmasters had a similar problem. We're going to play a clip of how he attacked this problem.
Masters, as you know, sometimes the hardest part of a speech is coming up with a topic. Now, occasionally one falls into your lap, like Ben has to do a topic tonight that he has to study. But usually, it's one it's a strain on your brain, and that was my problem with this speech. At first, I was enamored with the idea of an altruistic aborigine reciting Antigone, or an affable alligator anecdote. Now, that was too unreal. I rejected that, and I tinkered mentally with a boisterous botanist bantering with a burly but befuddled baritone. That was too bizarre. Perhaps, I thought, a good topic would be a cloistered cleric calculating the comeuppance of a comically cantankerous cardinal. That was far too clever. Perhaps a doleful dullard distraught by a disparaging diatribe of a diminutive dominatrix. Hmm, that was just dumb. Then I thought, would an egotistical egalitarian empathizing with an equally ebullient ethicist enrapture the crowd? Yeah, that was everlastingly stupid also. Before that thought became salient, I switched to the story of a facetious farmer fraternizing with a flamboyant, fervent flamenco dancer. That too failed. Next, I thought, how about a gag about a gregarious grappler gushing to a grandiose but grumpy greenskeeper? Or a hapless haberdasher harmonizing by a hounded hangdog that's hypocritically hazing him. I thought that might be hilarious. Ha, I thought. Instead, I toyed with the idea of an indigenous intellectual improvising, improvising to an immature idealist using idioms, or conceivably a jovid journalist jabbering to a jolly journeyman jouster. That was just not very justifiable. Then I studied up on knowledgeable, kind-hearted Keynesians, whose kith and kin were kleptomaniac kelp cutters. That was just too kitsch. I then shifted toward laconic lawmakers legislating and laboriously lambasting lavishness. That was not to be found anywhere. They never do that. So, I shifted toward marvelous musicians motivating a myriad of meritorious medical personnel. But there were far too many of them to be even counted. So, I thought back to Spiro Agnew's nattering nabobs of negativism. And I juxtaposed that to Nightingale's noteworthy nurses. And that seemed novel. But again, I became distracted by obvious observations of obstetricians. It was an opulent oratory of otolaryngologists. Well, the perilous predicaments of paratroopers, or the pious pontifications of politicians, could not overcome the quintessentially quarrelsome quartermasters or the quixotic quip of a quarryman. The revealing remembrance of raconteurs was more retrospective than the rancorous ramblings of ranch hands. But the story of a sincere septuagenarian seismologist and a systematic scientific synergy was hardly scintillating. It was just too sedate for my taste. My interest was piqued by tumultuous triumphs of teamsters toiling dramatically in trucks, which led, of course, to the ubiquitous umbrella uproar and its urbane utilitarian umbra. Vexating, vociferous vermin, violating vindictive vanquishing, was vulnerable to my inquisitiveness. But wacky, warm-hearted warriors, wandering, wearisome, and whimsical, seemed more plausible as a topic, as did zenial, zany xanagogues and xylographic xylotomous zesophages. Not really. I couldn't even say it. But yurt-dwelling, yoga practicing, yak herders, and yarn-spinning, yowling yokels seemed a yummy opportunity for a story of times of yore. In the end, it came down to either zealous but zany zygo music or zeroing in on zesty zoos. Alas, by the time I'd found my topic, I'd run out of time and the alphabet. I hope you have better luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. That was great. Excuse me. Sometimes he gets carried away. Thank you, Rick. That was great. As you can see, we have lots of options, and we can easily get caught up worrying too much about what to make our topic about. I think it's really important to pick something that's important to you, that you know well, and that you want to talk about. Make sense? For instance, you might talk about what you talk about with your friends. Oh, you don't have any friends? Well, you could talk about the fact you have no friends, Jamie. You could do that. You all know how to have a beginning, middle, and end to a speech. You all know to make it tie back to the beginning, if you can. You all know to make an outline once you have a kernel of an idea, and then to write it out, and then to practice. And then once you've done that, I know that you all know to make little bullet points, just to remind you of major topics that you want to cover. Not write it out word for word after you practice. That way, once you know it well enough, then you can bend a little bit, embellish it. Things that occur to you, things that happen in the audience. You can refer to somebody's speech earlier that day and still meld it into your story or your speech. Why do I keep talking about stories? I think a story is an excellent mnemonic device because it gives you an easy way to remember the story, and then the people taking your message back with them will remember the main points of your story, main points of your message, because they're hanging it onto the story. We remember big chunks better than we remember isolated facts. That's what I'm talking about. It's flexible, relatable, great way to get your story across. The other thing about a good story, and this makes it easy if you're telling a story, is you've got to own it. You've got to believe in it. If you don't believe in what you're saying, you may as well not do it. Like when they gave me this assignment, sort of, I thought at first it wasn't going to work. And then when they explained I could make it however I wanted to, I realized I could talk about using a story to give a speech, using a story to get my point across, because I think that's a really great way to do it. And I love it. Reginald Williams is the one who said, you've got to own it. You've got to believe in it. You've got to walk the talk. Another good thing to remember is never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Jamie Ward. Another person said, never let the truth get in the way, period. That was some politician or other, but that's not really important now. And we're not talking about that today. There are a few other tips that I'd like to talk about. There are a few other points I'd like to make about telling stories. And I got these from a man named Josh Campbell, who is a pretty good storyteller, speechwriter. One of the things he says first is be prepared, but not too prepared. Remember when I talked about practicing your speech? You don't want to make it sound like you have memorized every word, because we will eat mass quantities if we do that. You want to make it sound natural, like you're speaking conversationally, but you haven't necessarily remembered everything word for word. Remember when I said to make notes, bullet points, after you have it written out and you've got it practiced a couple times? You can do that so you have flexibility in your speech, and so you can accommodate different ad libs as they come up that you may need to do. Somebody says something, you can go, yes, and then fit it into your speech. Another thing is, and this is a very hard one for some people, you don't have to be funny because you are not. Believe it or not, I have been told this. Yeah, on more than one occasion, believe it or not. Enough said, we'll leave it right there. Don't try to be funny. If something is funny, it'll come up all by itself. Name names. If somebody else, if you can't use someone's name and they're part of your speech, they have power over your story. Don't let someone with no name determine your story. And names are way cool. Some people love colorful names like Ormo Bickle or Smiley Penrod, one of my grandpa's cousins. Those are way cool names, and they're colorful. And they have colorful paths, and I won't go into them here. Let's just say they're funny, tragic, laughable, comedic. There's lots of events that happen because they were human beings, just like all of you are. And you've got all of those things in your past too, if you just think. It's not a therapy session. If you're not comfortable with your story, don't tell it in public yet. Resolve everything first and then tell your story in public. That's pretty simple. Start from the beginning and end at the end. You have to trust your audience. This is something it's very easy for us to do, to over-explain. Some people call it mansplaining, I think. Don't rob your audience by telling them the moral of the story. You've got to trust that your audience will get out of it what you hope, or maybe what they want to get out of it, because there might be something there you should take credit for that you didn't even know was in your story. So don't over-explain. Start from the beginning, end at the end, leave it there. And don't go into a lot of details. Trust your audience. You're sharing human experiences. They'll connect with you more if you skip the boring details. Some say don't be too nerd-like. And the other thing to remember, this is a tough one for you especially, Jamie. The audience is on your side. Keep them there. They want you to succeed when you walk out there. They want to be entertained. They want to see you comfortable. They want to see you happy. And don't make controversial statements unless you have to. And don't try to offend the audience. You're not Lenny Bruce or somebody like that. And remember, every little detail, every little rule that you make for yourself, those rules can all be broken depending on the circumstances. And make yourself the own protagonist of your story. Now, I'm going to end this by showing you another clip of a story that some may find entertaining. I've got a hard stop. I've got to run off to another meeting, but I will be available for questions this afternoon or for beating up if you care to. Enjoy this next story. Thank you. I was fighting for my life. I was scared. It was dark in that bag. A troll had just grabbed me and threw me in his bag and was running off to the woods with me. I was going to be eaten alive. Fellow Toastmasters, honest guests, Mr. Contest Chair. I was a tough little farm kid, about 6 years old, but I was no match for a large troll. Where was rescue going to come from? Charlene. Charlene was no ordinary pig. She taught humans almost everything we know. Thousands and thousands of years ago, when Charlene was thousands and thousands of years younger, she taught humans languages. Her first language was Pig Latin. Other languages. Oops, Charlene and I slip into Pig Latin when we're conversing. She taught us all the other languages
Later, she taught us to walk on our hind legs. It didn't catch on with the pigs so much, but it did with us humans. She also brought us out of the Stone Age by inventing pig iron. Humans and pigs weren't always so pig-headed toward each other. When pigs and humans first started working on shelters, we had only one kind of covering, or paint. It was mint. It was mint colored, but it was called mint because that's the only color it was. Charlene just hated bland colors, as you can tell. Later, she developed and invented a system of making colors in all this mint. Eventually, the mint caught on worldwide, and in honor of Charlene and her Train the Trainers program, it was known as pig mint. Charlene also taught many things, like she had a group of singing pigs. She taught how to sing. They would often be heard singing late at night to the moon. The sound was so distinct that it became known as the baying of pigs. Hey, they don't get any better. Charlene had a sister who painted chapels, the top of chapels also, the ceilings. And Charlene always referred to as her sister Sis, and she became so famous that one of the chapels was named after her. You may have heard of it. It was known as the Sistine Chapel. Years and years before TV was invented, Charlene taught people how to do the quiz show, Beat the Bell. This was a quiz show where you had to answer a series of increasingly complex questions correctly before the bell rang. None of Carlene's contestants had ever heard the bell ring before they finished. For this great achievement, she was awarded the Nobel Prize. Now, this is enough about Charlene, but how did she save me? That day, I was dangling by my leg. The troll had got me. He was going to eat me. What had happened? I was doing chores. I was a little kid. Charlene was visiting our farm. One of her old friends, named Old Red. You may have heard of him. Talking dog my grandpa had. Charlene and Old Red were sitting there swapping lies. I was feeding the pigs. I hadn't noticed a troll had infiltrated our herd. As I turned my back to leave, he snatched me up and threw me in the bag. This is the point we came in. I'm hanging here, the troll's got me. Ha ha ha, nice try, kid. But I kept fighting, and I finally split his bag with my pocket knife, and I dropped out, and he grabbed me again. Charlene came to get me. She looked at me from a distance. No one can save you now, said the troll. You ignorant troll, you forgot about me, said Charlene. You'll save him when pigs fly, said the troll. With that, Charlene was sitting there. She unfurled her ears like this. She gracefully, little hop, swooped up and went in a graceful arc high over me and the astonished troll as we were looking up. She did a huge power dive right at us, and we were both scared. She was coming so fast. She grabbed me with one of her powerful forelegs, threw me on her back, went up, made another swoop, and came down and hit the troll so hard, she knocked him all the way back into the internet. And that is how Charlene saved my life. That is it.
Thank you. I have to run off, as I said, for this. Now, I'll be available later this afternoon if anybody wants to chat about anything, and I hope you enjoyed this, hopefully, thought-provoking short presentation. Thank you, and have a super day. Bye-bye.